Menopause Monday. I'm already ahead of myself. Today I am talking about menopause and adrenal fatigue, how important the adrenal glands are actually to us having a pretty symptom-free menopause. And in actual fact, it's really interesting. The more and more reading I've done on it, the more I've come to realise that if we've got a pair of well-functioning adrenal glands, the chances of us suffering the typical symptoms that are related to menopause are much, much more reduced. And when you look back at, when I deal with people, whether it's in my therapy centre, whether it's people in my boot camps, people who have had or don't deal with stress very well, or have had prolonged stress, so chronic stress over a number of years, those are the people who tend to respond really badly to the menopausal change. So, hot flushes or flashes, dryness, irritability, that sort of crushing feeling of fatigue. And actually, it all seems to tie back to our adrenal glands. If you've got adrenal glands that work well, and if your perception of stress is positive or relatively positive, then we seem to navigate the menopause a lot better. Now, this is not anything to do with hormone replacement therapy. This is all based on lifestyle and natural choices, which is the way I've chosen to navigate my menopause. And it's working. But the adrenal link, which to be quite honest, when I was perimenopausal and I was sweating buckets, it was awful. It all ties in and makes absolutely complete sense. So bear with me, I'm going to try and describe it as well as I can in my laywoman's terms. But I've been chatting to people recently who have had experienced adrenal fatigue. And in actual fact, it wasn't even diagnosed correctly by their doctors. First of all, I'll just go into why the adrenal glands are so important for menopause, and then I'll explain a little bit about adrenal fatigue and the things that we can do, whether you're menopausal or not, that can help overcome adrenal fatigue, and the things that we can do to actually, prevent ourselves from getting adrenal fatigue in the first place. And also, if you're not yet menopausal or you're perimenopausal, so you're going through, you've just started getting hot flashes, you might be having irregular periods, you might be having those symptoms of not being able to sleep so well, or you might be feeling a bit ratty, or for, tiredness. There are certain things that you can be doing to prepare yourself to support your adrenals, so that you can get through the menopause a bit more easily, as it were, without so many symptoms. Because, when you think about it, a couple of generations back, or even one generation back, people didn't really talk about perimenopause like they do nowadays. Now, that partly could be the fact that, there were certain subjects that were regarded as taboo. But I think predominantly in this particular case, it's the fact that they didn't have the stress around menopause like we do these days. And it's pretty much related to the fact that we are constantly rushing. I mean, everybody's short on time. We're all frazzled, and it's not just stress as in dangerous stress. So many of us are bombarded with nutritional stress because either we don't eat what we should be eating, or we do eat a little bit of healthy stuff, but then we fill ourselves full of processed food or too much sugar or alcohol or smoking or whatever it might be. That creates nutritional stress. It could be emotional stress. So, grief, sadness, anger, resentment, jealousy, all that is negative, and that all creates stress. Environmental stress, we're surrounded by, although we don't have the smog like we used to do a couple of generations back, also in some parts of the world we do, but on the whole, our environmental stress, there's pesticides in the water that we're drinking, if you eat meat, or even if you're vegan, the plants, that our crops are sprayed consistently with various chemicals. Even if you eat organic, the ground is still not as nutritious as it used to be. It's all overworked, it's overfarmed. And so it's really hard to actually get the nutrients that we need in order to thrive efficiently as a human being. And so we're bombarded by these types of stressors on so many different levels. So don't think it has to be somebody hiding in a dark alley to create stress. We are all being bombarded. EMFs, electromagnetic fields, you know, from our phones, from our laptops. How many electrical devices, plugs, that do we have kicking around our houses? Those all give off frequencies, and that is also stress. So, you know, there are so many different ways we can... Oh, did I just see you? Hi, Jill. Lovely to see you. I thought I just saw wellies and paws. And Claire. Hi, Claire. So there are so many different sources of stress. But just to explain the relevance specifically for menopause to begin with. Oh, Snoopy, she's such a pain. Sorry. Snoopy wants to come and say hello. She's a little nuisance. She's like a baby. So essentially, in our brain, we have a tiny little gland called the hypothalamus, and it's right deep inside the brain, right in the centre. And that also helps to regulate our heat, our thermal regulation, as well as you know, myriad other things that it does. But there's like a feedback loop within our body. So when we start to go into menopause, obviously we stop laying eggs and our ovaries stop working as well as they used to do, and we don't release the amount of estrogen that we used to release. So our adrenal glands are actually the backup gland to our ovaries. So they technically would help to back up the job of the ovaries to release estrogen. But when obviously our ovaries stop working, if we have adrenal fatigue or we're under chronic stress, so if our adrenals are not working very well, and by the way, they just sit on top of the kidneys, the two little sort of nodules on top of the kidneys, when the hypothalamus in the brain is sort of sending a message to say, okay, you know, release an egg, it's time to release an egg, time to shift out some estrogen, and obviously the ovaries are not responding properly. So the brain is then having to shout a little bit louder. But because obviously the ovaries are not working properly, but because the adrenal glands are then not picking up that messages, they're the backup guys. But when they're not picking up the messages, because they're already tired, they're having a bit of a nap. So, you know, our ovaries, they've gone on retirement. Our adrenal glands are having a nap. So the feedback loop back up to the brain to say that, you know, that we're either too hot and the body needs regulating, or, you know, we might be that, you know, all sorts of different things in our bodies. Basically, the joys of live video. Shh. This happened to me earlier when I was demonstrating a stretch as well. It's just like frustrating. Essentially, that message is not getting relayed back up to the brain, up to the hypothalamus, which accounts for then the sudden hot flashes and maybe the sudden surge of anger in some instances. Now, when our adrenals are working well, the adrenals back up the ovaries very, very efficiently, because we're not designed to lay eggs forever. You know, our bodies are designed to go into retirement as far as estrogen and progesterone are concerned. But our adrenal glands are designed to help to keep us alive, and they're designed for long-term benefits. So essentially, I mean, just to sort of give you an idea of what adrenal fatigue feels like, because if you have a blood test from a doctor, it's not going to show up. Your adrenal glands need to be sort of like 90% screwed up before it'll actually show up on a blood test, you're getting into really serious territory there with all the various Addison's disease, Cushing's syndrome, etc., etc. But there is a saliva test that you can do, which will pick up the amount of cortisol in your saliva, which will show or indicate whether or not you've got adrenal fatigue. But the symptoms are fairly obvious and fairly simple to spot. So it's like a combination. So for instance, you know, if you're walking up the stairs or you're walking up a hill and you've just got that lead feeling in your quadriceps, in your muscles, in your thighs, that's because when our adrenals are getting tired, they basically start to leach away at our muscles. So our muscles start to basically wither up and, you know, get significantly smaller and a lot weaker. So that's why on an incline you will feel that sense of really oh my goodness, I can't even get to the top of the stairs. Now, I felt that sometimes, and I think my adrenals are in pretty good order. But so don't just think, oh my gosh, I puffed and panted when I went up the stairs today. That must mean I've got adrenal fatigue. It doesn't. But when you're combining with other symptoms, then you may well have. Another one is craving for salt, particularly towards the end of the day. When you have gone into adrenal fatigue, it essentially means you're not putting out the cortisol into the body like you would do as a normal human being. So when you've got low cortisol levels, you actually have salt cravings. And one good way of working out if you might have adrenal fatigue is to have maybe just like a quarter teaspoon of a really high quality salt, so Himalayan rock salt, something like that. Stick it in a normal glass of water, and if that glass of water tastes normal to you or pleasant to you, the chances are you've got low sodium levels in your body, which is a sign of adrenal fatigue. Also, low blood pressure is a sign of adrenal fatigue. Heart palpitations are a sign of adrenal fatigue. Terrible intolerance, particularly if it's somebody that annoys you or somebody that you find a little bit slow, or maybe you're driving and you just have this road rage that comes over you all of a sudden. That feeling of overwhelming anger and frustration and irritability, again, is another sign of adrenal fatigue. It's pretty hard to get adrenal fatigue, because you have to be really giving yourself a hard time in life, but it's becoming more and more common. Chronic stress is what sets it off. So chronic stress would essentially mean that you're living on a wire where you're putting out far too much cortisol consistently, which affects your skin. High cortisol affects your collagen. It will lead to brittle bones. All the symptoms of menopause, facial hair, all of these things. So every symptom, dryness, every symptom that you get with menopause can be linked back to high cortisol levels, because of the fact that the adrenal glands are taking over the job of the ovaries. But when you've got chronic stress in your life as well, because the adrenal glands can't work properly, that's when you get adrenal fatigue. So that's when you get the dip in cortisol levels, which makes you have the salty cravings. It also affects your sleep, leads to the irritability. So there are various things that you can do. They all start with lifestyle, sleep. Try and make sure that you are getting at least your minimum requirement. I mean, everybody needs different levels. I've read also that for people that are coming off, trying to get over adrenal fatigue, if you're like an average 8-hour a night person, maybe up it to 10 hours a night if you can do, just for a month or so, to allow your body to just get back some sense of normality. Obviously eat a healthy diet, lots of green vegetables, because your potassium also falls when you've got adrenal fatigue, as well as your salt levels, as well as your calcium. It just screws up the electrolytes in your body. So make sure you're eating lots of green leafy vegetables, cruciferous vegetables. Ideally, if you've got a juicer, juice your green vegetables for a while. It will take some of the stress off your body, having to sort of digest the fibre as well, which is obviously indigestible. It's good for our colon, and it's good for keeping us regular. But when you're in adrenal fatigue, you want to be as kind to yourself as possible, just for a short while, until you can start to get back to some sort of semblance of normality. So you want lots of healthy food, reduce your caffeine intake, reduce your alcohol intake, cut out refined sugars, reduce your refined carbs, or ideally replace all refined carbs with whole food, whole wheat, whole, oaty, whatever you want to do. But use brown rice, use brown pasta. Don't go for the white stuff. Cut the sugar out. Eat lots of fruits. They're very high in antioxidants. Don't eat processed food, because again, it's just full of rubbish, no good for you at all. Adaptogen herbs are incredibly powerful for adrenal fatigue, just because they help the body adapt to stressors. So things like ashwagandha, schisandra, maca, cordyceps, what's the other one, reishi mushroom. They all help incredibly when you've got something like adrenal fatigue, because they just help the body adapt and to cope with stress. So they're going to be minimizing the effect that stress has on your body. I'm fine. So insomnia for 20 years, I'm finally sleeping with GABA and melatonin. I had adrenaline. Yeah. So melatonin helped you sleep, did it? And GABA helped you sleep. Girls got soul. And how are you now off the adrenal fatigue? Have you managed to recover from that? So many people have got it, and it's one of these things that is just, it really made me cross actually. When I always research these really well before I go live, and I came on, I think it was Medical News Today, and it was talking about, obviously Medical News is very much tied into traditional doctor network, and adrenal fatigue is not necessarily a confirmed thingamajig, and there is no sort of complementary therapists will suggest lifestyle changes, but of course lifestyle changes help with everything. Well, yeah, that's part of the reason that you don't need to be treating the symptoms. If you've got like, oh God, it absolutely drives me crazy. They'll stick you on HRT to help you get through the menopause, but HRT significantly increases your risks of cancer, increases your risks of stroke, and it still necessarily doesn't help you get through the menopause. You've still got those issues to deal with at some point. I know bioidentical hormones are supposed to be not quite so bad, but at the end of the day, if we can support our bodies through the natural process of menopause, surely isn't that the better way to go? I mean, that's the way I'm taking it. And I'm pretty healthy and fit, and it seems to be working pretty well for me. So I just, I know we all have different lifestyles, and we all have different ways of coping with things. One thing I did also want to say about this, seems to be coming back. I was a single mum and 2 jobs, had all the symptoms. My life is much calmer now, but still have some symptoms. Again, I think as mums, and particularly single mums, I know exactly what you mean, because I'm a single mum and everything falls on my shoulders. And in fact, actually, I've got to say, I hope this doesn't get back to my ex. When I was single, it became easier because I didn't have that expectation that somebody might do something that might help. And when it wasn't done, it made me so frustrated. So at least I know, I am the one that has to put the bins out. I am the one that has to fix the taps. I am the one that has to do the other bits and bobs, because it's just me. But actually that takes the stress away, because I know it's just down to me to do it. So I understand what you mean. It's really hard. But one thing I also wanted to say is that in most of my videos, I always talk about how beneficial exercise is for us. It's incredibly beneficial. But when you've got adrenal fatigue, you do not want to be doing exercise that puffs you out too much, or at all actually, because you're going to be raising your cortisol levels. Now, raising cortisol is fine when you haven't got adrenal fatigue, because it'll the stress that you put into your muscles, actually no, exercise gobbles up cortisol. But when you've got low cortisol, which is associated with adrenal fatigue, you don't want to be gobbling up more cortisol than you need to. You want to be preserving what you've got, because actually cortisol is incredibly important for the body. We just don't want too much of it, but also we don't want too little of it either. So with exercise, you want to just be doing something like walking out in nature is the best, because it gives you that sense of expansion, gives you that sense of connection with Earth. We're all human, we're organic creatures. And take time out, try and relax. I think it's really important to have boundaries, to get really good at saying no unless it absolutely suits you and enhances your life. Even if you live a super frazzled life, we all have to nip to the toilet every now and again. When you nip to the toilet, use that not just as a pee or other break. Sit down and relax. Actually, clear your mind, deep breathe, focus on your breathing. Or meditate. If you can meditate, just sit and zone out, even if it's for 2 minutes. 2 minutes here, 2 minutes there. If you're sat in the traffic, or no, maybe not in the traffic jam because you need your eyes open, but if you're waiting for something in a queue, you can pretty much just zone out. Nobody's going to know what you're doing. And just zone out and just center yourself again. Focus on your breath, relax. And it's just snatching those little moments of the day where we can do something that's beneficial for us. We can create that space. I think we all have this tendency to, oh, we've got spare a minute, I'll just scroll social media and see who's doing what. Just leave the phone alone. Unless you use it for your business. I mean, I use my phone, my laptop, I use it for my business, obviously. But as soon as I turn those off, they're off. I don't scroll. I only scroll when I'm into business mode. Otherwise it's off, because I know what a suck it can be. And you can just spend hours scrolling, having a look at what's going on in everybody else's life. It's just like, no, save me. So exercise has to be really, really low key. Even something like Tai Chi, if you've got time for Tai Chi or very, very gentle yoga, especially if you work with your breath, it's incredibly beneficial for adrenal fatigue. And there was also something else I wanted to say, and I can't quite remember off the top of my head what it was now. What was it? I can't remember. It doesn't matter. It might pop into the back of my head. Oh, clover. That's another one. Clover is incredibly good for supporting your adrenals, and iodine. It's really important for our adrenal health. So maybe take like a sea kelp supplement to help with your iodine, just to help with the adrenals while they sort of get back to the land of the living. And it's just a matter of, I think, avoiding perfectionism, maintaining your boundaries with pride, not feeling guilty, because of course that creates stress as well. Getting really good at saying no, and setting up an environment which is kind to you, and just being okay with that, because boundaries were a huge help. Yeah, definitely. Same with me. Boundaries. I always used to be a people pleaser. I hate confrontation. Even the thought of constant confrontation makes me feel hey floss, makes me feel stressy. And but I've got to the stage now, the price of not being confrontational, but the price of not maintaining my boundaries is just, yeah, it's just awful. I just don't do it anymore. No way, Jose. And I feel so much better. And do you know, it has such a knock-on effect to every other aspect of your life too, because it makes you more focused, it makes you more productive when you know that you're taking those little things to help yourself on a daily basis, however that might be. When you're in adrenal fatigue, boundaries were a huge, yeah, oh yeah, so I've just read that bit. I wondered if you'd mentioned something else again. Boundaries are just incredibly important. I think I had a few questions actually on my IG story earlier, and I think, hey Bridget, I think I've answered all of them. Off the top of my head, they were how to help with adrenal fatigue, what are the symptoms, I've gone over all of those. And bearing in mind that if we can help the health of our adrenals, the symptoms of menopause, just tying it back into the fact it's Menopause Monday, is they're going to be much more reduced, or possibly you might even get through it without any major issues. It's all that hypothalamus feedback mechanism from the hypothalamus to the ovaries, which are not responding particularly well, to the adrenals, which if you've got fatigue or you're near fatigue, they're buggered anyway. So that message then isn't going to get delivered back up. So the loop is broken, which is why then we get all these other additional issues that are related to menopause, such as the brittle bones, sagging skin, hair where we don't want it, and hair falling out where we do want it, irritability, brain fog as well, same thing. Adrenal fatigue makes you really confused. You forget things. It's almost like you've got a constant fizz going on in your brain. You're on overdrive with your thought processes, but none of them are particularly productive thought processes. They're just scattered fragments of thoughts, and then all of a sudden something else comes in, and you can sit at your laptop and think, I don't even know where to start. I know I've got so much to do, but I actually don't know where to start, and I don't know what to do, and I don't even know how to start to do it. And it's that sense of complete overwhelm, which is another indication of adrenal fatigue. So I hope that has helped. Again, it's all pretty much, it's common sense stuff, but it's incredibly difficult to do until we get to crisis point where we know we've got to make a change. So what I would really encourage everybody to do who's listening to this, is just be kind to yourself. feed your body with healthy food, allow your body to sleep, say no unless it helps you, just no. And have a few supplements, so maybe the adaptogen herbs, maybe sea kelp because of the iodine, maybe clover because that supports the adrenals too. You're welcome, Claire. I hope that was helpful. And most of all, just be your own best friend. And once you've managed to sort of get into a calmer state of affairs, you're going to find that life type pretty much falls into the right boxes that it needs to fall in, rather than overspilling like an egg carton, and it's just crazy because all the eggs are cracked and every egg's blended in with every other little bit, that every other little egg house. It's just creating that sense of space and a place where you are nurturing yourself regularly, not just as the odd treat. Oh, I'm going on holiday, so I'll have a week off. You've got to do it, even if you have to do it when you're sitting on the toilet and you're just stealing 2 minutes here and 2 minutes there. It will make a big difference. And another thing I think is also really helpful is when you're in bed, when you first start to wake up, rather than rolling over and thinking, oh no, the alarm's going to go off, or oh no, I've got to get up. There's a real difference between that, because you're still going to get up. So it's your perception of how you see it. You still got to get up. So just lie there and take stock of your body. How do you feel? And maybe have a few positive affirmations. I don't know, if affirmations are your thing. I think anything that you say to yourself that's positive is beneficial. And have a perception of having some, starting the day off positively and kindly towards yourself, and doing the same at the end of the day. So rather than focusing on the things that were a bit frazzled and maybe didn't go so well, focus on the things that did go well. Focus on the fact that you got out of bed in the first place, and focus on the fact that you've managed to do another day, and focus on the fact that you are in bed and you're going to get to sleep, and you're going to wake up and do the same to get tomorrow, hopefully with boundaries imposed and looking after yourself. Just briefly, there was there was a research study done. It was fascinating, which went into how different people cope with stress, and it was tied into adrenal fatigue. So people who were given, they both had the same amount of stress, but there was one group that had the stress and dealt with it really productively. They were real solution thinkers. And there was another group that saw stress as the be all and the end all. It was just, the straw that breaks the camel's back. And although they both had, these huge amounts of stresses in their lives, the people who dealt with stress productively and saw it as a solution to, or a problem to find a solution to, their indicators in their bodies were incredible. I mean, I can't remember all the markers off the top of my head, and it doesn't really matter. All it goes to show is the fact that we all have stress, and we all have a choice as to how we let that stress affect us. And if you can see yourself as the survivor and the warrior about those problems, the chemical effect it has on your body is so much more positive than if you have the stress and you see it as, oh God, something else has gone wrong. How on earth am I going to manage now? The chemical difference is enormous. So I'm not saying it's an easy thing to do, but I am saying it's absolutely possible to do, because when I was in my darkest days of divorce and dad dying, and there were all sorts of other things that were going on at the same time as well, it was just horrendous. There were days when I just thought, I can't believe it's even got worse. And then there were days after that which was like, really? And it's got even worse. And the only way I could do it was to think, right, I actually can't physically live like this. I've got to change how I deal with it. And I remember there was this one awful day, and I took a piece of paper and I wrote my problems out, and then I wrote, right, what are my solutions? How can I find a strategy for this? How can I find a strategy for that? And the strategy wasn't always clear, but just having that frame of mind that I was going to find a solution, at some point it was going to come to me, and I was going to take active action to get around that problem, made the whole crappiness of that situation seem much more doable. And I look back on those moments now as really life-changing events, um, because they were as awful as they could possibly be. I mean, they were awful, but to when I look back and I see myself sat there writing out my solutions, and that feeling that I felt afterwards, not having the not having the solution and the key to all my problems, but knowing that I was on the path to find it. I felt almost like I was an explorer of my own nervous system, and somehow I was gonna jump those hurdles, come hell or high water. And if I couldn't jump them, I'd dig a tunnel underneath them, and I'd find a way to either get over them, around them, or underneath them. And I was gonna make sure that somehow I was gonna survive. And I think when you can adopt that type of mindset, it really helps give you a sense of security and a sense of I can do this. It gives you a sense of resilience, and it's all it is. It's just a change in the way that you're seeing that problem. So I know that's gone on a bit. I sort of went into more of a therapy session, but I think it's absolutely crucial the how we deal with stress, and how we can, with just a few little changes, we do have nearly everything that we need inside of us. When you hit adrenal fatigue, you do need a bit of an external help with healthy nutrition, with the adaptogens if you choose them, clover, iodine, etc. But you're welcome, Jill. But I hope that's helped a little bit, because although I've not had adrenal fatigue, I have had those, just a raft of horrible and then worse and then even worse experiences all combined. Why do they always happen at the same time? So you can get through it. I promise you can get through them. So I know, Bridget, it's awful, isn't it? It's just if we only we'd known each other then, wouldn't it be so cool? Us girls on here now, struggling or having struggled or whatever our situations, if we'd have been able to, if we'd known that we existed and we could have had a little group to sort of help each other through our worst moments. But we're here. Our boudikas came out and we've survived, and we're going to continue to survive. So, right, on that, I will love you and leave you. Thank you so much for joining me. And as always, if you've got anything you want me to cover in next week's Menopause Monday, let me know. And I'd be more than happy to add that to my list, my growing list of episodes. And yeah, great to have the latter part of my Monday with fellow girls who've been through the same. So I will catch you all soon. You take care.